Cassandra.
Okay, so that. And when were you born? What year were you born
I was born in 1951.
in 1951, so the 1950s. And where did you grow up during your childhood years?
I grew up in, it's now called South Central Los Angeles,
Hmm.
but when I grew up, it was called the West Side.
How far away were you from, let's say, uh,
USC, I was not far, I was within walking distance of Exposition Park and USC.
in USC? Okay, and that would be University of Southern California. When you think back to your childhood, how would you describe your childhood friends? Like, what color were they? Was it boys and girls? Just your childhood playmates that you grew up with.
Well, starting off when I was a young person, I had two partners in crime, Kenny and Tony, and they were both African American.
Hmm.
However, going to 36th Street Elementary School and then Fauché Junior High School in Dorsey, all three schools were well integrated. However, by the time I graduated from Dorsey, the underclassmen had turned to be about 50% African American and 50% Japanese. Right. Well, the reason why it was 50% Japanese because a lot of the families that who were Japanese were part of the internment, and they had returned to Los Angeles and reclaimed their homes.
What types of childhood games did you guys play?
Well, to be honest with you, we didn't go outside during the week. We came home, changed our clothes, and did our homework. However,
Ah.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we would play baseball, football in the street. I
Hmm.
mostly cheered because I was such a bad athlete that they didn't want nobody wanted me on their team.
So you
So
did
I kept
more.
scoring cheers, right?
No,
Right,
what? So you
right,
did more cheerleading.
right, right. And then when the girls went to play with one another, the boys went out to do whatever boys did at that time. We would go in my backyard and play with dolls. My mom had created a playhouse in the garage.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we would play with dolls. We would make mud pies. We would act out songs from the radio, from Motown. It was the Motown era, the birth of the Motown era. Um, and practice hairstyles, even younger, like 8, 9 years old, we would practice
Hmm.
hairstyles and so forth.
What would you say your earliest memory of someone trying to point out to you that that there's this big difference or this perceived difference between being a black person or a person of color and comparing that to being a white person, a white American?
I can think of two specific incidences, Kevin.
Hmm.
The first one, because my mother was very fair, in some cases could pass for a white woman,
Hmm.
and my father was brown, and my sister was red bone. So I
Hmm.
thought I was adopted because my sister and I are 14 years apart. And
Oh.
my mother went on to explain to me why the African American race was so many different colors, and she likened it to a garden of flowers.
Okay.
The second incident I remember was watching the television and the Southern in the South when they were in Woolworths and marching for freedom, and the police had dogs and hoses.
Hmm.
That memory has never left my mind.
Hmm.
Even now, at almost 70 years old, I still remember very clearly watching the black and white television with my parents. And they went on to explain to me why those sit ins were recurring, why the police were using. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Why people who looked like us were being bitten by dogs, um, why they were being lynched,
Hmm.
because Jet Magazine would always put stories in the magazine about lynchings.
Hmm.
And so I began reading at a very early age. And so by the time I reached the age of understanding. I was able to read the Jet magazine. I was able to read about the lynchings, about the sit-ins, about the protest. And as I said, it's still, I still think about it from time to time, and it's still a painful memory.
Right. And then as you got older,
when I was 13, we motored across country, and my parents wanted me to see, the country. And when coming back, we stopped in Dallas, Texas, and we stopped at a restaurant to get some barbecue. And the waitress said, "We don't feed black. You can't come through the front door to eat, but we will feed you around the back. You can get your food to go around the back." And so I was so incensed, being a California kid. I said, when I get home, I'm going to write President Kennedy about this, because I know he doesn't know. That's my 13-year-old mind, right? And then that November, he was assassinated in Dallas. So that was the beginning of the end of the age of innocence for me.
Can you think of any other experience?
I went to college. I went to a small liberal arts college here in Los Angeles. So there were only 8 of us on a campus of about 400 or 500 students.
Oh, okay.
So because my mother raised me with a good sense of self and not to be embarrassed because I was African American, I was able to hold my own in college.
Okay.
When they would ask me questions about Black people, my response would always be, I can't speak for all Black people. I can only speak for myself. So while there might have been some racism on the campus, we kind of steered clear of one another. When we were in class together, I always had my armor on. I always had Angela Davis sitting right next to me. And Rosa Parks on one side. In other words, I was standing on the shoulders of those people who had gone before me to create an environment where I would feel comfortable.
Right.
And I think there were a lot of kids there who were hippies,
Yeah. Okay.
So, they were pretty cool people. They were good people.
Right.
I was elected town hall representative. They didn't call it a student body, they called it town hall. So I was elected town hall representative, which translates into president.
Okay.
Right. So
and they had to nominate or vote for you, and obviously all types of people voted for you. All different colors of people voted for you.
Right. Since there was only 8 of us on campus, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And then as you got into the workforce, can you think of any experiences where someone tried to make it a black and white thing, or a person of color?
Absolutely. My first job out of college was with a company as an assistant swimwear buyer. And little did I realize at the time that I was hired to fulfill their requirement for hiring minorities.
Oh, okay.
And so it was predestined that they were going to figure out a way to get rid of me, which they did. However, and I came home in tears, woe is me, the world hates me, why? And, my mother sat down and explained to me the lay of the land, as it were. It's not because of you as a person, it's because of your paint job. So I went on and sued for unfair employment practices. And my lawyer told me that he never loses a case. So I thought at the time that it meant that they were going to find enough on me to make me look inferior. But what he meant was they knew if they went to court with this, they would lose.
Oh, okay.
So what happened then was they paid me out of court, and they paid me all my vacation, all of my illness time, plus enough money for me to buy a car and go to graduate school.
Wow. And they're doing that just to put you in the position, what, temporarily? So just for a little while to say, hey, we have a person of color working here, and then
Right,
after some
right,
time they just say, okay, well, we had enough of that. Let's get back to normal. And
right, exactly. And what they did was when the EEOC came through on an inspection, I was on one side of the building and there was a man on the other side of the building, and the building was in a U shape. So they walked the team by, they introduced me to them, and then they walked them around the building and introduced them to the African American gentleman that was on the other side. So after they left, that's when the campaign began to get rid of me.
now, while you were working there, how did they treat you? Did they just
They
leave
were
you?
aloof. Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
they were aloof. You
mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm,
they gave me all the crappy jobs to do.
mm-hmm.
Inspect swimwear that was soiled. They had me digging fabric out of the trash can. Vendors would send 6-yard pieces for them to decide they wanted to use to use the fabric, and they
Mm-hmm.
would tell me to go downstairs and dig it out of the trash can in order to recycle it or whatever. And I could never understand why they would throw it away, why they didn't donate it to schools, to home economic programs. And I brought up that question: why don't we give it to home economic programs?
Wow.
So I understand that's not where God wanted me to be in the fashion business. I begin to understand that. So I came out of school and went to graduate school and got my master's and became a teacher. Got my credential and became a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And being a teacher for 45 years was one of the best experiences I ever had. Which brings me to another experience when I went to the San Fernando Valley to teach. I went in to set up my classroom and I was leaving, and there were some African American girls who were part of the what's called Permits for Transportation program, which allowed bus. It was their answer to busing.
Mm-hmm.
Now the irony of it here is that the white kids didn't come into LA, but most of the black kids came to the Valley because parents thought West was best. And I was leaving for the day, and there were about 4 or 5 girls out front, and they were crying. I said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "They won't let us be cheerleaders." And I'm thinking, why not? And they said, because I said, well, why? Because we ride the bus. Well, that was a white speak for because we're black
Wow.
or African American. I said, what do you mean they won't let you be a cheer? I said, come with me. And I just turned around, went in the building, and just said, this won't work. It's
Mm-hmm.
been 45 years, of course, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but long story short, they were able to become cheerleaders.
But at first they didn't want them to be a cheerleader because they were black.
Yes.
And then as you basically challenged it, what was their reaction? Like what did they
Oh,
try to come up with?
the feigned innocence. Oh, we didn't think they would want to ride the bus home after the game. Well, if the football team rode the late bus home, why wouldn't the girls want to ride the late bus home? Well, we weren't sure that they could afford uniforms. So I got in touch with friends and we raised enough money for the girls to have uniforms. It's like, don't play with me. Don't give me these excuses, because I'm going to find a way around it.
And then so they ended up being cheerleaders. And what did it end up being a good experience for them, or they still
Oh, yes.
tried? Okay, that's good.
No, yeah, it ended up being a good experience for them.
How do you see the future? When you look back at it, how you grew up, the experiences that you had when you grew up, and then all through your education, and then going out
Mhm.
into the workforce, all the way up until now. How do you see the future in terms of race and racism?
As a woman of God and a woman of experience, my hope is that things will get better. especially as a result of this pandemic, because at this point we are all the same because we're going through the same experience where we are confined. I say we're on punishment. One of the kids messed up, one of our siblings messed up, and everybody's on punishment. I don't know if you have siblings or if you went through that.
Yeah,
If you
yes,
have
definitely.
okay,
Yeah,
right, exactly.
yeah.
Uh, so I said we're on punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all losing loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So my hope is we come out of this in a better place as human beings. When I look at it realistically, I'm not sure that's going to happen because racism is now part of people's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's breathed into them as children. It's presented as a rare jewel as children. And as people grow up into adulthood, they have enough of those so-called jewels that they feel they're entitled to be mean-spirited and to be racist. And to have people hate you just because of the color you are, for some people, that's a hard road to hoe. For me, like I said, at almost 70, it is what it is. And it's not going to make me back down. And I try to pour that into young people, even my preschooler friends, you know, my 3 and 4-year-olds. I say to them all the time, do you know how smart you are? Do you know how beautiful you are? Do you know that you're important? That you can be anything you want to be? I say this to 2 and 3-year-olds. So my thing is, if they can pour racism into their children, I can pour hope into our children. I can make them be entitled because that's what they deserve. So I'm going to stay on this battlefield until the Lord calls me home.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I just feel that they continue to educate them with that racism, and there's nothing stopping us from doing the opposite, you know, where we just do it on a daily basis, and we do it for life, just so that it combats those people that still wanna perpetuate the racism, really.
Right. And we have to pour into each other hope and confidence and composure and grace. We have to pour that more of that into each other. And we have to pour it into our children. And frankly, we have to pour it into people who don't look like us. So it's really important to me to take out that bottle of pride and confidence and so forth and pour it into people.